Day 8, reading The Power Broker. We're in part 5, The Love of Power, chapter 28, The Warp on the Loom. Got through pages 624 through 630. Read for considerably longer today, not because I was reading the pages themselves, but because I was really ingesting the content of them and trying to understand the significance of the instruments Robert Moses created and then used to consolidate his power. Yesterday and the days before, I was really trying to internalize the significance of what a public authority is, because it was the instrument through which Moses put himself at the helm of so much power. These last few pages dial into the element within the instrument of the public authority that was the crux of Moses' untouchable power, and it was the provisions to create bonds, to create contracts that really solidified Moses' power. It took me a long time to kind of internalize this. Today, not only do I not have a real understanding of the infrastructure of law, but I have no real grounding or understanding of finance and how the two interplay. I had to take a long time today to research the significance of contracts between a government and an investor. Why a contract between a government and an investor in the form of a bond is so inviolable, to then be able to appreciate how Moses is writing his powers into the contents of that contract is what solidified his power. This took me 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to even begin to start to synthesize and internalize those pieces of the puzzle, namely bonds and them being contracts, essentially, and why that contract is so impermeable. I didn't appreciate that a government relies on debt, and so baked into the literal Constitution of the United States is law that ensures a sturdy bedrock of trust for financial contracts between a government and whoever's buying its financial assets to be trustworthy, to be sacred, to be inviolable. And in these 5 pages, understanding that is how Robert Moses, solidified his power. And maybe it's a testament to the inherent complexity of some of these pieces of the political puzzle that he was able to slip the type of language into the laws that I'm assuming get passed, because he does get this power. I know that he built these bridges. I know that he is the power broker, that it wasn't caught on. That he didn't get caught. The language that he used in writing his bills and amendments into the public authorities wasn't sniffed out. So maybe, I think I am a slow learner. I'm a slow reader. But the density of the components of these legal contracts, as far as the law is concerned, but as well as the financial implications and the density of the understanding of the instruments within them via the bonds and the significance of those contracts, is just a dense, difficult thing to appreciate. So much so that really only this master of law, Robert Moses, was able to sneak this by all of the legislature. I'm sure it's going to explain more how he did it, and I'm sure it's going to be in some sort of backhanded, deceptive way. But even then, I feel like I have a grasp on it now, but it's really taken me some time to digest. I don't think I appreciated the significance of contracts created by a government. So what I've learned today really is that the significance of a contract between a government and an investor in a financial asset that the government issues. I've learned that, I think this might be kind of a lesson from yesterday, but complexity is a breeding ground for exploitation. Robert Moses' mastery and understanding of the law and the components that made up the elements of the government and public authorities, and then his understanding of finance, of the significance of bonds and financial contracts, particularly when issued by governments, is what allowed him to be the mastermind behind this master stroke that solidified his power for decades and allowed him to exercise his will outside the confines of what was assumed to be the jurisdiction of the law itself. So complexity is a breeding ground for exploitation. Mastery is power. Understanding is power, particularly in this realm of politics. He was able to leverage his understanding of the law to entrench himself for his entire life. What I'm assuming is most of his entire life. It's hard to believe that, I mean, I just get the feeling that we think somebody knows what's going on, and I think I exist and engage under what could just be sort of a false sense of security, thinking that somebody out there understands what's going on and that somebody is running things because they understand them better than I do. This feeling that people in positions of power have some sort of awareness or knowledge or understanding of the framework of our world that enables them to be in those positions and like be guiding the rest of everyone else. And that maybe that's not the case. I mean, Moses was one of those people, but he seems to have bamboozled everybody else who was supposed to be the overseers of the political landscape, which feeds into ultimately the cultural landscape and the landscape in which everyone has to live. But those people didn't know what was going on, didn't understand the things that they were supposed to be masters at themselves, allowed for a person more cunning than them to circumvent them and all their rules. And I guess what's to say that can't happen now? I mean, it's only in hindsight that we're able to like piece together how all of this happened in the power broker and through the absolutely elite tier journalistic work that Robert Caro did, that all of this information is brought to light. But what is happening now that is not being exposed, may never be exposed, that is the underbelly of the fabric of reality that is nonetheless charting its trajectory, that we can just have no idea about because of its complexity, because we trust in the people that are responsible for overseeing it, that they understand and know what's going on. It's kind of an unnerving thought. And then on the flip side, there is an empowerment in seeing how Robert Moses executed. I think I would like to believe in some sort of degree of meritocracy, that mastery is rewarded. And I feel like that belief at least is reassured when reading about someone like Robert Moses. He was a master of his domain to such an extent that he was able to accrue and consolidate every aspect of power that he needed to be able to do what he wanted. Once you get into the details of what he did do and its morality and whether or not it should have been done is a separate issue, but the fact that he was able to master the system to put himself in that position is something awe-inspiring and awesome in the true sense of the word. Whether he could have achieved this mastery without his ruthlessness, I think so, because I feel like it's his powerful mind at work in dismantling the elements of the components of government and finance that he needed to be able to leverage to get what he wanted that aided him in writing these laws, not necessarily his selfishness in this case. I think his selfishness and ruthlessness probably aided him in other ways, although it left devastation in its wake. But I think it's this brilliant mind of his put to work trying to figure out how he can leverage the system as it was to get what he wanted, and then he does. And then it's the question of whether what he wanted was a good thing, and I think that it comes to be proven that no, it wasn't. But to appreciate his mastery is reasonable. I probably touched on this to some extent in this ramble, but really internalizing the content within these last 5 pages, particularly trying to understand the legal significance and the financial significance, how there's interplay between laws and finance, even what bonds are, why bonds are the bedrock of finance in a way, how just limited my understanding is when it comes to these core elements of how the world works. There is so much that I fundamentally don't understand. Like intuitively, internally, that is the bedrock of how our world functions. And that's another kind of unnerving thought, but leads me to have that much more gratitude and deep reverence for authors like Robert Caro, who, if you put in the work and the energy into understanding their work, you do gain a greater understanding of the world we live in. And that is a great gift, one that I'm truly thankful for, and why I'm sitting here trudging through this brick of a book. And so I'll continue trudging through in the spirit of trying to understand our world so that I might better navigate it for myself, and hopefully in creating some of this content help you better understand it for yourself. But it's a mission. It's a mission. So with that, I guess we'll catch you on the next page, and I'll be reading slow and learning slower, but we'll get there.